I decided to Google Carol Leifer, right? What has she been up to lately? Okay. This is where it got interesting. I found, published in Vanity Fair a couple of years ago, an excerpt of her memoir that she wrote, published in 2014. The memoir is entitled, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Crying, Lessons from a Life in Comedy. In it, Leifer recalls the inspiration for some of her funniest Seinfeld episode ideas. One of my favorite is, George brings a deaf woman to a party so she can lip read his ex-girlfriend's lips to find out why she broke up with him, right? Okay. But interestingly, she also notes that she quickly learned on Seinfeld to mine her own life, especially her life as a female, for ideas that would set her work apart from her largely male co-writers. She recalls pitching one idea for an episode in which Elaine, who some of you who are so young probably don't know who Elaine is, but Elaine was sort of the female, protagonist, I guess. Elaine thinks that the mirrors at Barney's are skinny mirrors. Okay, we all know what skinny mirrors are, right? Okay. Leifer says, I knew this was a unique pitch for sure when I had to explain to the guys on staff what skinny mirrors are. Well, she recalls some other episodes as well, including another episode that I cannot repeat here, other than to say, for those of you who are Seinfeld fans, that it involves a frustrated saxophonist, but I'll leave that one out for now. In a Reddit AMA, right, Ask Me Anything session, later that year, in 2014, Leifer also noted, you need to take what makes you different and use it to your advantage. So now I was starting to feel a bit better. Okay? Not only had I found, thankfully, some incontrovertible proof that women are funny, right, or at least can be funny, I also realized that there's something more important for me to talk to you about than the sometimes daunting statistics that we find related to women at work. But before I go there, let me have another word or two about statistics, right? I am sort of the token academic for today, and I am a researcher. Okay, not all of my work is quantitative. In fact, a lot of it isn't, but I appreciate a good regression analysis as much as the next academic, all right? I'll just tell you that. And yes, it does bother me that study after study after study still in 2016 continue to demonstrate that women command lower wages than men for the same work in a wide range of professions. Okay? And yes, it is frustrating to me that a study done just last year in 2015 by McKinsey and Company and by leanin.org, Sheryl Sandberg's organization, it examined the employee pipeline of 118 US corporations and found that in 2015, that while women occupied 45% of middle management roles, okay, so almost equal representation, they made up only about 1/6, that is 16 or 17% of the C-suite, which are the top management roles in these companies. And that similar statistic, 16 or 17%, applies to C-suite leadership and board of directors membership in Fortune 500 companies today. Okay? And of course, if you get up to the CEO level, that number goes down into the low single digits, right? It's about 4%, I think, for women CEOs in the Fortune 500. Okay, but here's the thing with statistics. Okay, and I want you to listen to this well. Here's the thing with statistics. They're not you. They are not you, okay? Not only, they don't define you, they don't define what you're capable of doing, nor do they define your future or your trajectory, okay? Statistics and studies can only report the past, and at best, they represent the almost present, at very best, okay? They do not represent the future. Now, absolutely, studying statistical trends can give you one possible outcome for the future, but let me tell you, a lot of you in here, I'm imagining, are finance majors, from the business school at least, right? And any investor in the stock market can tell you that predicting the future based on the past is dangerous and often a losing game, right? Now, in my field of study, psychology, right, I basically do applied psychology in the business school. We do know that gender biases, like racial and other biases, are often rooted in very deeply seated, often unconscious beliefs as well as some deeply seated human tendencies, such as something called homophily, which is the tendency of individuals to associate and bond with similar others. Okay? So this helps to explain why these biases have been so slow to change over the generations, and frankly the centuries, despite the efforts of many. But it also suggests, unfortunately, that they are going to be difficult to eradicate altogether. On the flip side, okay, so that's the downside. On the flip side, the power base held by women in the workforce is growing. Too slowly for sure, but it is growing and growing steadily. And as that power base grows, so do the opportunities for women and the options for women seeking to develop both a career and a rewarding personal life. So a lot has happened in the past 30 years, and I do expect these shifts to continue for the next 30 years. But while these shifts are occurring, where does this leave us? Where does this leave you? Well, listen, I don't know Carol Leifer, all right, as much as I like to talk about her. I don't know her. But I believe that in some way this is the approach that she took to her career. She ignored the statistics. She got in the game, and then she looked for opportunity. In particular, she found opportunities to distinguish and differentiate herself and her work, and in part by leveraging the unique perspective that she brought to this male-dominated field as a woman. And to be honest, this perspective is much truer, much more resonant to me and my own experience in 30 years of being a woman in the workplace. Do I have war stories about being the only woman and sometimes the first woman ever in professional situations, especially earlier in my career? Absolutely. Yes, I do. Could I tell you about being asked about my plans for marriage and children during a job interview at one of the world's largest oil companies? Or being told that I would never be able to work in the field at one of the world's largest industrial machinery manufacturers? Okay, note that both of these occurred as I was preparing to graduate with my MBA in Finance and Operations from the Wharton School. And by the way, I did not end up at either of these companies, so don't go back and look at my resume to try and figure out who they are, because they're not on there. Absolutely, I do have these stories, and I'd be happy to share them with you over a drink someday, right? But here's the thing, for every one of those stories, I have several, a good handful of other stories. Stories about leaders, both men and women, who mentored me, taught me, inspired me, and encouraged me. And whenever I'm asked to point to the factors underlying my career progression, which now, as a professor, I get asked this a lot, right, in the business school by my students, I point first, at least I hope I do, I think I usually point first to these men and women to whom I owe a great debt, a great debt. But second, I point to the work that I did to locate those men and women, right? To identify those men and women, to identify those jobs working for people who would be supportive, basically to identify those opportunities, okay? Now, this is what I wish for you, both for today at this wonderful conference and in the span of your professional career, okay? That your watchword be opportunity, not challenge, opportunity. You still can and you should continue to be aware of and do everything you can to counteract gender bias and gender-related challenges in the workplace, okay? These are not going to go anywhere, and there are things that you can do to make them better. But meanwhile, you need to stay laser-focused on discovering and creating opportunities to differentiate yourself. And this won't always be true, but if being a woman lends you to points of differentiation, so much the better. So much the better.